Today we're going to be looking at PF source again, but instead of generating particles, we're going to be generating what's called mParticles, or basically PF source's version of physics. So let's explain what I have going on here. I have a teapot that hopefully by the end I'll be able to have particles come out of the end of the teapot, into the funnel, and down into my bowl, and it will fill up the bowl. Now what I have is a teapot, but what is special about the teapot is if I've turned it into an editable poly, and if we take a look at my polygons, what I've done at the end is I've closed off the end of the teapot, and I have these polygons selected. And it's important that you understand that I have these selected. Okay. And then I created a cone, which is basically a cone with two open sides, and then a teapot at the end with no spout, no top, and no handle, and it's also enclosed. So now what I'll do is I'll come into my Create tab because I want to create something. Under Geometry, do my drop down, go to Particles because I want to create a PF source. I'm going to drag it into my scene, click and drag. The icon size doesn't matter because we're not going to use the icon to generate the particles. We're going to use the teapot. But really what I want to do is come in to the Modify tab and open my particle view. And what I'm going to do here is delete everything. Delete it. And we'll see that our particle icon, our PF flow icon, our PF source icon is gone. So I'm going to come in and click in mParticles, mParticle flow. And if I click in my scene, I'll see 3ds Max's default for mParticles, which is like a little simulation with these cubes. I don't want to do the cubes. I want to do my own thing. So instead of birthing a grid, which is how they're creating these cubes of this cube of cubes, and instead I'm going to click on birth and bring it over birth grid, and now we'll see that my cubes have disappeared. I click on birth, and again, like everything else, all my other particle systems, I have emit start and emit stop. So let's start at 0 and stop at maybe 150, not 750, 150. And the amount, maybe we'll say, well, let's go with that 200 right now. That sounds like fun. Okay, so but what I want to do is I want to emit from this teapot. So in other videos, we went over how we can use a position object. So the position we're going to spawn our particles at an object. I'll click and drag that just under birth. I'll click on my position object. Under my emitter objects, I'll click add and choose my teapot. And what I'll see is if I scrub my timeline, I see all my particles being emitted from the teapot. So let's change a few things. One, I don't want cubes. So let's go to shape, which it's saying shape 01 is a cube 3D. Let's change it from cube to, let's say sphere 80 sides. And then my size, that's pretty big. So maybe we'll change that to 5 instead of 10. Something a little more manageable. That looks good. Okay. But I don't want to emit from everywhere, all the surfaces of my teapot. I just want to emit from those surfaces that I closed up before that we talked about. So I'll come into position object, and instead of location surface, I'm going to choose my drop down and choose location selected faces. And that's why we talked about how I had an editable poly. I had selected those faces. So now we're emitting just from the end. And they're emitting all over the place, which we really don't want that either. So what I'm going to do is come into my MP world, click on my MP world, and then this little smiley face, this gives us access to our driver parameters. We're going to click on that. And then the Modify tab, you can see I have access to all of the parameters that it's going to let me change. I'm going to change my acceleration from 386 to maybe 1500. So now I have a lot more gravity going on. And now my particles, instead of going everywhere, kind of going straight down. Not nearly as all over the place as they were before. But another thing that I want to do is I want to kind of have my particles going in an arc, like we would see realistic fluid do. To do that, I'm going to come into my icons and choose speed. But not just speed, speed by surface. Because I again want to emit my force, my speed, from that surface. So click on speed by surface. Again, I'll add my surface geometry. And what I should see now is I've got a nice little arc. And it's a little fast to get into our funnel. So we'll change our speed from maybe 300 to 150. Let's see if that helps us. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now our issue is that our particles pass right through our cone. And the reason why is because, well, to put it simply, our cone doesn't have any collision, and our particle system doesn't know that it has any collision or not. So what I'll do is minimize this so we can get a better view of what's going on. I'm going to click my cone, and then I'm going to come to my modifier tab. Under my modifier list, my drop down, I have to use a special modifier, and it's found under World Space Modifier, and it's called P-Flow Collision Shape. So what I'm saying is P-Flow, which we're in, we're going to add collision to this shape. So it adds it automatically, but we need to make sure that we activate it. If we don't activate it, it's like it's not even there. I'm going to activate it, and then go back to my P-Flow, my particle view, and then I need to tell my particle system that I have collision on this object. In other videos we did that by using collision. That won't work for us here because we're not using regular particles, we're using mParticles. So instead I have to choose MP collision. So I'll click and drag MP collision, take it right under my world, click on my collision, and then it's asking for deflectors. I've made a special deflector, or made this a special deflector, so I'll click add, click on my cone, and now I have my PF source. See if I click on, then I have attributes that I can change about my P-flow collision shape. Now let's see what happens. Let's minimize this so we have a better view. And here we do have collision. But what we can see is that sometimes our object passes right through it. And that has a lot to do with how fast these particles are moving. Now let me click here. Then I'll go to my particle view. And if I go back to my MP world, we can see why that's going on. So I opened up my driver parameters. And what I see under advanced parameters is I have what's called subframe factors. Well, that's kind of low for what we're trying to do. We have particles that are moving pretty quick and trying to collide with other things. So let's change that from 2 to like maybe 8. Let's see what happens. Now what we should see is that even if those particles are going faster and they're hitting, we're using more time to try to calculate our collision. That's an easy way to explain it. Now the issue we see is now we're getting stuck in the end of our cone. So let's fix that. An easy way to fix it without having to modify any kind of geometry is we'll just go into our shape and we'll make our shape smaller. So maybe instead of 5, we have 2.5. So we'll move this back over. And now we should see that our spheres aren't getting stuck anymore. But what they are doing is kind of exiting weird out of our funnel. Let's maybe change the size just a bit. We could also change our speed, we could change our gravity. There's a lot of things that we could change to try to figure out how to get this to land right. We could even move our cone, we could move our teapot, any one of those things will work. Let's just see if we can change this size to be a little bigger. Nope, that's not working for us. So maybe we'll come in and change that speed to be just slightly less, maybe 100. That's not really following how we want. And all I'm doing is playing around with these parameters until I get something that is how I want it to be. And what I'm going to do, since this isn't really working, I'm just going to go ahead and move this over a little bit. There's a lot of parameters that we could play with, but we'll just see if we could get it a little bit better there. And for what we're going to do, just to show how this works, we're going to say that this is good enough for us. We do have some of them falling in there, and when we add the collision for this bowl, then we'll see how it works as well. And let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with my cone. I'm going to click my bowl, minimize U. Under my Modify tab, I'm going to again go down to my World Space modifier and P-Flow Collision Shape. I'm going to activate it. And then I need to bring my particle view back so I can again say that MP collision. Now I have another one I can add. Now I have cone and teapot. And what we should see is now the particles that do make it inside of the teapot stay there. So what I would suggest and what I would advise is to play around with these things. And although I wouldn't say that we were 100% successful because we had a lot of our spheres that were outside of our bowl, these are some of the things that you could play with, and you could definitely do it different, so it would have a lot more success. But we were able to show what we had talked about, where we have our particle being emitted from a certain part of our teapot, coming down our cone, and landing in the bowl. Some of them did anyway. Now go ahead and play around with that. Have a completely different system if you want. The basics of what we go over still will still help you. And yeah, have fun.